Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're diving into a super important chapter for your boards, power sharing. Let's get this revision started.
All right, let's jump right in with a big question. Does sharing power actually weaken a country? It kind of sounds like it might, right? But is that really the case? Let's figure this out.
So, to get to the bottom of this puzzle, we're going to look at two real-life examples, two democracies that had a similar problem, but wow, did they choose different ways to solve it?
Yep, we're talking about Belgium, all the way in Europe, and our very own neighbor, Sri Lanka. Now, what's interesting is that both of them have a real mix of people, different languages, different ethnic groups, all living together. And that mix, well, it created a pretty big challenge for both of them.
Okay, take a look at this. It breaks down the population mix for both countries. See that? In Belgium, you've got a majority of Dutch speakers, and in Sri Lanka, a big majority of Sinhala speakers. In both cases, there are smaller minority groups. And this imbalance, this majority-minority situation, is right at the heart of the problem.
So the big question is, how did they deal with it? This is where things get really interesting, because their stories split into two totally different paths. Let's start with Sri Lanka.
So, Sri Lanka went down a road called majoritarianism. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it basically means the majority group, in this case the Sinhala speakers, decided they should get to rule however they want. They completely disregarded what the Tamil minority needed or wanted.
And this timeline, it shows just how things went from bad to worse. That 1956 act making Sinhala the only official language, that was a huge turning point. Imagine your language just being ignored. That, plus other government policies that favored the Sinhala community, really made the Tamils feel like outsiders in their own country. And what was the result? Well, it's pretty tragic. Because they refused to share power, the distrust just grew and grew until it exploded into a full-blown civil war. It was a massive setback for the country, socially, culturally, and economically.
Okay, now let's switch gears and look at Belgium. Their leaders saw what could happen. They saw the danger of that kind of conflict, and they chose a completely different approach. They realized that if they wanted to stay united, they had to respect everyone. So they chose the path of accommodation.
And they really worked at it. Between 1970 and 1993, they actually changed their constitution 4 times to get it right. Look at this. They made sure there were equal ministers, they gave power to state governments, they even created a special government for Brussels and another one just for cultural issues. It was a really clever and unique solution.
And the result? Peace, unity, no civil war. By simply respecting what every community felt and needed, Belgium stayed together. It's an amazing example of how power sharing can actually work.
So these two stories, Sri Lanka and Belgium, they teach us something huge. They show us why sharing power isn't just some nice, fluffy idea. It's actually a really smart, practical thing to do.
We can actually group the reasons into 2 big buckets. First, you have prudential reasons. Think of these as the practical, smart reasons. It helps reduce conflict, keeps the country stable, just like we saw in Belgium. Then you have the moral reasons. This is about what's right. In a democracy, power sharing is the very soul of the system. People have a right to have a say in how they're governed.
Okay, so we've covered the why. Now let's get into the how. How do modern democracies actually share power? Well, there are 4 main ways they do it.
Let's go through these one by one. And hey, you'll want to pay close attention here because this is a super common question in exams, so make sure you get this.
First up is horizontal distribution. Think of it like 3 pillars standing at the same height. The legislature, that's our parliament that makes the laws, the executive, the government that carries them out, and the judiciary, the courts. None is above the other. They all keep an eye on each other, making sure no one part gets too powerful. We call this a system of checks and balances.
Next, we have vertical distribution. If horizontal was about pillars, this one is like a ladder. Power is shared at different levels. You have the union government at the top for the entire country, then it goes down to the state governments, and then even further down to our local governments, like municipalities and panchayats. This is exactly what we have here in India. It's called a federal structure.
Third, power can be shared among different social and language groups. The community government in Belgium is the perfect example we already talked about. And in India, we do this too, with reserved constituencies. This makes sure that even socially weaker sections of society get a fair chance at representation.
And number 4, the last one,
Power is also shared among different political parties and interest groups. The easiest example to think of is a coalition government. You know, when no single party wins a clear majority in an election, they have to team up with other parties. And when they do that, they are literally sharing power to run the government.
So let's wrap this all up. What's the one big idea you absolutely have to take away from all this?
It really comes down to this one powerful line. Power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. At its heart, a real democracy is about giving people a stake in how they are governed. It's about making sure everyone's voice has a chance to be heard.
And that takes us right back to the question we started with. Does sharing power make a country weaker? Absolutely not. In fact, it does the exact opposite. It's the best way to ensure peace and unity,